So Asmongold has just been like full-throatedly sucking pig dick and defending the crackdown on student protesters. I don't really know how much this means, like on a sort of ideological level, because Asmongold kind of seems to be a fucking idiot who just follows whatever path or trend he's given. Also, Asmongold's editor is a Nazi, which might be influencing him negatively. Elon recently unbanned Nick Fuentes on Twitter, and Asmongold's editor put that as Elon unbanned a, quote, white supremacist, end quote, mildly right-leaning political commentator Nick Fuentes. He's a Nazi. Literally nobody but a Nazi would do that. So pretty cool that one of the biggest Twitch streamers is just, Asmongold's stupid enough that he could probably be led by the nose to basically any political point. So the fact that he has a Nazi as his editor. Anyway, apparently they talked for like 50 hours. I don't know if I can watch all this. What happened?
Line, like you're talking about Martin Luther King. He also explicitly was against blocking transportation. And so
wow, this one was rough for Hasan, wasn't it? Oh man. Okay. All right.
So there were lines even that he had.
Wait, Martin Luther King also participated in the Montgomery bus boycott. It's all good.
But yeah,
also they blocked roads all the time, like constantly.
I didn't want to derail your stream or anything. Or like
No,
no,
not at all. My stream is a sequence of endless derailments in general. So,
yeah, yeah, I mean, like, so I see what you're saying, kind of with like the guy entering the encampment, but I think that
they were arguing for on Twitter prior to this. I saw this. Asmon was just doing his standard like goalpost moving, whining about how like there was a video of one guy who was trying to move through some protesters, and that one guy is like a pro-Zionist agitator who was literally working with the cops to try to bait engagement from the protesters. And he was trying to just like fuss with them, and Asmongold saw a deliberately cut video of that and was like, look, this one poor student can't get to his classes or some stupid shit like that.
it's kind of problematic if people just get into a university and build like an area and tell people they can't go inside that area. And also, like in the video, it's hard for me to know whether they're really stopping them from the encampment. Because like, I mean, and you know, you can look at it from my perspective, because you look at that video and it doesn't seem like there's an encampment behind those people.
Yeah, they framed it in a way specifically so that it would invoke that response from people that are unfamiliar.
So you think that like basically they
oh yeah, here's the video with 13,000 likes on Asmongold subreddit, because he's basically like, ever since all of the right-wingers on Twitch have gotten banned or moved over to Kick or whatever else, Asmongold is now basically the hub of right-wing political engagement on Twitch. I don't know if anyone else even comes remotely close.
Oh, look, they're making their burger while I'm...
This is the agitator. Again, he was literally shown... There was a photo of him shaking hands with the LAPD. He's literally a paid op.
Going this way, excuse me. This is what they do. Everybody, look at this. Look at this. I'm a UCLA student. I deserve to go here. We pay tuition. This is our school.
Where is he pointing to?
They're not letting me walk in. My class is over there. I want to use that entrance. Well, I can't take it. Will you let me go in? This could be over in a second. Just let me and my friends go in to class.
We're not engaging with that.
Then you can move. Will you move?
We're not.
See, this is a video filmed by him and his crew. He could move around them to get to there. He literally just wants to break through this group right here because he wants to cause shit. That's the entire point. Yeah, that's the whole point. Like, it's completely meaningless. You can see all that open space behind him. He's not being blocked anything. Asmongold is stupid enough to fall for this. Yeah, UCLA protesters around and find out.
I feel like the LAPD is stalling, is only going to set a horrible precedent for future protests. What do you think they should do? I don't really know what the options are, like what's on the table, but like, this is what would make sense to me, and like, I don't really know what I'm talking about, but it would make sense.
Actually, I'm just going to cut it there. Sorry, I'm just going to cut it there. That's fine. Okay, these are all clips of him covering the UCLA protest. Yeah, okay, so he's just in favor of like the police crackdown, you know, whatever. Let's get to the conversation.
They filmed it from a direction where there aren't...
It's not that I think, I know. I was there.
Oh, no, when did you go there?
I went there 3 days ago, I think. And he was there actually even that day as well. He's been there every single day.
Mm-hmm.
So he's one of these broccoli-haired Zoomers that runs around and is like trying to use America.
Oh, thank you very much, honey. Yeah, here we go. See, this is that guy, even in the same shirt. Like, this is what you're up against, guys. The agitators and ops aren't just like independent grifters. They are literally working with those in power to disrupt the protests.
American foreign policy and active conflict to basically make TikTok clout for himself. He's also worked with groups like Stand With Us, which is a group that directly gets funding from the Israeli government. So like he has worked with the Israeli government to do propaganda already. But I'm sure this is a great career opportunity for him. That's why he's been on Fox News. There's videos of him like trying to debate and agitate teachers that are near the encampment. Even Sky News called him a counter protester and an agitator.
Remember when we saw that random like pro-Israeli anti-protester student at, what was it? Which was the university? And then somebody in chat provided the link to her bio. I think it was SDL, and it turns out she had literally worked with the Republican Party. All of this is being like coordinated, not in a conspiratorial way. It's just the media knows what the narrative is. We've seen this happen before with big subjects like the Iraq War. They know who's on the right and the wrong side. It's all an astroturfed effort. They know who to talk to. They know who to coordinate with. Media talks to police. Police and media both talk to respective local political leaders. Which political leaders do you think are most likely to get along with the cops? Yeah. And the right-wing, sort of like corporate types who control local media, like Sinclair Group or Fox News or whatever else. Like, you know, we're up against capital here, an impossibly well-organized capital class. That's what happens when you really threaten U.S. hegemonic interests.
Like he's like a known figure. This is not a random guy. That's also the reason why he is, at least for UCLA campus, he's the only video of like anyone even claiming the students are blocking people from going to campus, because he's deliberately going up to the encampment in an effort to try to get into the encampment to start fights. When I was there, a bunch of Zionist counter protesters tried to do that as well. And the students were incredibly well organized, and they just set up a human chain to, like, they don't even like physically apprehend or remove people. They basically just body block them as though they are there, you know, having a picnic.
By the way, all protests ever do this. At the civil rights protest, or the Civil Rights Act protests under Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., it's not like a bunch of black guys marching to their group would let one white dipshit go in there and go, oh, what's up? Oh, you're black? That sucks, bro. Oh, you're black. I'm gonna get in. You're not letting me into your crowd? What's up? Why are you blocking my way? Why are you blocking my way, bro? Why are you blocking a white man? Why are you blocking a white man? Like, you seriously think they would just like every protest needs to let any dipshit just muscle their way in with a, like, Jesus Christ, you know? The whole protesters don't let agitators into the group, that is like every protest ever.
Oh yeah, no, I saw that, and I think it was like 2 nights ago, not last night whenever all this stuff got removed, but the night before. I mean, it was pretty obvious that like the Israeli or like Zionist or anti-Palestinian ones were the aggressors, and I think that that's a bad thing. I mean,
you sound experienced at that, but I do what I just did anytime I see a group of 2 black people together, like in public, like if they're friends or whatever.
I don't think that the guy is in the wrong, though, for being a counter-protester or even for being an agitator. Really, it depends on how you define the word, because, I mean, that's his freedom of speech, and I feel like...
Oh, this whole thing is going to be a complete waste of time, isn't it? Asmongold isn't going to say anything. He's going to waffle every point, and his only final position is going to be like, well, I just don't feel right about this or something. He's so stupid. He's so fucking stupid, dude. Genuinely. Is it his Nazi editor who's leading him around like this? How much coordination is there? You know, does he like is he aware of the fact that like how far right he is? I have no idea. It really is crazy. All of like Hitler's strongest soldiers. You know, you have a Mexican, Nick Fuentes. You have Candace Owens, a black woman, and then you have a guy who has to, like, I don't know, scrape mice off the floor for his breakfast or something. Whatever the f he's on about. You know.
That's what's fair, in the same way that it's fair for those other people to go and protest for Palestine.
Yeah, but the difference is, first of all, Bear Mace,
genuinely like the dredges,
or Mace,
you know?
in general, is illegal to bring to protest, and he's like flashing it. There's another video of the students. Literally, he walks up to them when they're gearing up for the cops to show up.
Yeah,
and the students say, "We are peaceful. We're peacefully protesting against the Israeli genocide here. Like, we see your Bear Mace.
Christ.
Like, please, you're making us feel."
If you're able to walk across this shit to get to your monitor, then bro can walk around to get to class. Oh my god, that's true. That's true. I can't believe the pro-Palestinian drink cups and trash piles are blocking the Zionist agitator Asmongold from reaching his desk.
Feel unsafe. And he actually literally does not have a right to have that on.
Did you see his new video defending Fuentes, calling him mildly right? I didn't see the video, only the description, because I know that his editor is a Nazi. I didn't see the video. I don't know what he's saying in the video. My guess, because again he's very, very stupid, is that he would say, like Asmongold would say something like, well, I'm all for free speech, and, you know, they say this guy is bad, but I don't know much about him. And then somebody in chat would say, like, he's based, yo. And then Asmon would be like, yeah, I hear, like, the left kept targeting this guy. Like, he would, like, defend him without defending him, basically. Just my guess. I haven't seen the video. I'm not gonna see the video either, but I'm right.
On him. And yet, that on that very same night, last night, he was over there dabbing it up with the cops and shit. The cops obviously don't give a shit about the pro-Palestinian encampment, especially because 2 nights prior, at this point, when the counter-protesters actually tried to enter the encampment, they came with weapons, they came with fireworks, they came with skunk spray.
Asmon also has a habit of saying he's getting canceled. He makes an I've been canceled video every 3 days, yeah.
They came with bear mace.
That was like the day that, because they were chanting the "Where were you?" Was this the "Where were you" moment?
I don't know what do you mean, where were you?
Oh, yeah, I guess you were sleeping. Like last night, whenever it happened, like a lot of the protesters were like chanting at the cops.
Oh,
and
yeah.
They were saying, like, "Where were you?" Yeah. Okay. So like we're talking about the same thing, right?
So the night prior, the reason why they were chanting "Where were you?" last night to the cops is probably because the night prior, Zionist counter-protesters actually stormed the camp and beat the shit out of some of the Palestinian students, or pro-Palestinian students, with like wood pallets.
I watched it happen. I watched it happen live. It was disgusting. Like I was kind of disappointed that the police didn't arrest any of them.
Yeah, the police actually came.
They did.
Yeah, and they stood by for an hour and 30 minutes in single file line formation while these guys were beating the shit out of, and these guys aren't even students. Like you can see it in the video. They're like, these guys are like adults. They're older. You know what I mean? They're like older than the students.
There's also the protesters that are Palestinians that were identified.
Okay, so he's a civility lib then? Well, no, Asmongold is a fascist. He's just like actually one of the purest examples of the moderate wing of fascism thing. The positions that he arrives at, the things that he defends and attacks, these are he ends up like in line politically with the fascism side almost every time. But when challenged, it's all done under the artifice of civility, right? So right now the dynamic is Asmongold has always been like a very civil guy. But over time, Twitch has cracked down on right-wingers on Twitch streams more and more because, as it turns out, it's really difficult to be a right-leaning political streamer and not violate terms of service when it comes to being bigoted, you know? So he was always like a Trump guy, but he was like a civility-leaning kind of Trump guy, like kind of nice, you know? But over time, more and more right-wingers have been banned, so more of them have flooded over to Asmongold, the ones who didn't leave over to Kick or whatever, right? So he's getting pushed further and further into, like, the radicalization side of things, you know, Nick Fuentes, or, like, race stuff or whatever, and his positions are getting more and more far-right. You know, he's taking his opinions from that, like, pedophile lolicon VTuber streamers videos, and his chat's egging him on the entire way. No, it's not his mask dropping. A mask would imply that Asmongold had like a private set of positions that he's disguising with the civility. I don't think that's true. I think that he thinks of himself as like a civil little baby birthday boy with glasses, and everyone else who's mean and canceling him is just like being insane about it, right? Because he's civil, right? But the civility is being employed in the service of far-right talking points, ones that he can't defend, which is why the moment Hasan comes on, he shrivels up and becomes a birthday boy, right? He was literally cheering on the LAPD as they crack down on the UCLA protesters. But then Hasan comes on, he's like, oh, well, I think it was disgusting, the violence that was used against the protesters and da-da-da, you know? Like, he doesn't have any real opinions, but I don't think it's deliberate dishonesty.
As being older as well.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
It's hard to
I know,
really
I'm saying...
Yeah.
No, I'm saying that, like, a lot of these guys, especially the more violent...
Asmon the fascist, what a joke. Vosh going off of the deep end again. Oh, hello, Asmongold fan. Like, listen, maybe think about, like, the way I presented that argument, okay? It's not that he's an out-and-about ideological fascist. It's that he's being driven to the outcomes and beliefs that fascists have from the perspective of some, like, moderate civil kind of... You know what I mean? Like, it's not it's he's very malleable. It's very easy for him to be pushed into that position. You know, I think it's like pretty it's not like a difficult line to push or whatever. It's not like a, you know, crazy out there position.
Ones have already been like identified as not going to UCLA, and they're basically return customers. So. And they're basically return customers at this point. It was a big point of contention with the students too, because UCLA was like, "Oh, we are going to take administrative action against the counter protesters for being violent," and the students were frustrated with that because they were like, "How are you going to do anything?"
He said he supports Palestinians. What he says doesn't matter. That's the point. You're falling for it. A person can say anything, but if you look at his channel, UCLA protesters get what's coming to them. Nick Fuentes is a white supremacist. Like, it doesn't matter what you say. He says anything because he's not stupid enough to have a consistent position, you know? And yeah, Candace Owens also says she supports Palestinians for what it's worth. So yeah, I don't know. Yeah, like, think about it.
Administration to someone who's not a student, because a lot of the counter protesters were not students. Like, there were known right-wing figures and stuff like that amongst the counter protesters. Anyway, so the reason why the students were frustrated, understandably, is because they've demonstrated great messaging discipline so far. They are they're as limited in their disruption as possible. And historically speaking, campus-wide protests such as this one is infinitely more disruptive than what the pro-Palestinian encampment looked like. I mean, we're talking in 1968, they were taking literally students would go in during the civil rights movement with guns and take deans hostage. In 1968 in Colombia, they took a dean hostage for like days.
Yeah, I know about that.
Yeah.
Back when we were a real country.
They would literally just like shut off access for a dean from like leaving their room. They'd be like, "No, you're not leaving." So historically speaking, people on the right side of history that we understand were on the right side of history have taken way more radical and way more disruptive approaches to protest. So all things considered, both in the Columbia University, where they overtook Hamilton Hall again, just like they had done time and time again at Columbia specifically. That hall has a historical significance for student protesters. And also especially at UCLA, where the encampment was like not even remotely disruptive, simply just taking on this massive lawn space where there's a lot of demonstrations usually, and building like putting tents around it and trying to protect the tents from people coming in and it up. There are videos of counter protesters breaking into the encampment in spite of the human wall, the human shield, the human chain that they create. And as soon as they get in, they start.
The thing that's so sad about this is that this could genuinely be a great educational opportunity for Asmongold, but I know that he's looking at his chat right now, and his chat is full of people screaming like, you know, libcuck, he's lying, violent protest, blah, blah, blah. And like none of it's going to stick, you know?
Throwing hooks, throwing bows, stealing people's tents, trying to break the tents apart and stuff. So that's the reason why they don't want to let in random people to protect the students, because they know the university won't do
he wasn't streaming during this convo. Oh, okay. All right. Maybe there's a chance.
Do that. As demonstrated by the fact that they didn't do that when the counter protesters came and the cops literally stood idly by.
I do think that like whenever I watched it live, there was like crazy violence. And then once the cops showed up, even whenever they were in that line, the violence went down by like 95%. But I think that you're totally right that the counter protesters were like the agitators. They 100% were, and they were being violent. And to me, it was disappointing that I think the police didn't arrest more of them, because it was pretty obvious that the pro-Palestinian ones were the ones that were the victims in that situation.
Yeah, but they ended up arresting only the Palestinian, like the pro-Palestinian side. And the night prior, they didn't actually engage with the counter protesters until they were setting off fireworks and launching them directly in the encampment. So the question is, why are they picking a side? Because they've arrested hundreds of students, both at Columbia University, both in CCNY. What's up?
You mean, why are the police picking a side?
Oh, the police are picking a side, and it's not the side that is the violent side in this situation. It's the side that's peacefully demonstrating.
Okay, I actually think that Hasan's doing really good. Hopefully, we're doing a bit of content stealing here, I suppose. Hopefully, I don't think Hasan would mind. Because the problem is, like, it's a lot of Hasan talking, and Asmongold isn't going to say very much because,
In my opinion, a direct violation of First Amendment rights. I don't even personally believe that protesters are supposed to, protests are going to be disruptive. Some of those protest movements you might not agree with, or the taxes you might not agree with, but ultimately...
Is Hasan's chat emote locked? Yes. He often emote locks it when he's debating because he can't read text anyway, and he just wants it to be kind of a vibe thing. I honestly think it's a good idea. I should do it more myself. You guys can get real distracting sometimes. Though I'd have to add more emotes because he has access to the entire Twitch library of emotes, whereas for this, it's just VGG's emotes. So I'd have to add a lot more, I think.
The way I look at it is, they were the perfect victims in this situation, even though I don't expect them to be perfect victims. And yet, even after all of that, they were still met with violent free speech suppression from the state.
I don't know if it's really free speech suppression, right? Because they're not really getting arrested for protesting. They're getting arrested for putting a bunch of tents on the campus whenever the campus tells them to leave.
Yeah,
I mean, the police
nobody ever gets arrested for protesting. That's just that's not a thing. Everybody,
yeah, it's like black men don't get arrested for being black; they get arrested for loitering. You know,
everybody always when states like in Russia. Or
and since to try to make like an actual point out of this is what I mean by like liberalism being the moderate wing of fascism, right? You can arrive at the same outcomes as a fascist government through the invocation of liberal institutionalism and civility politics. Basically, the law and order thing sounds different when it comes from liberals or fascists, but it means the same. Biden saying dissent must never turn to disorder isn't functionally that different from like, so Biden has like talked about outside agitators, threat to campus, dissent must not turn to disorder. How is that meaningfully different from Trump raving about China-backed BLM protests, anti-American, breaking the law, functionally, how different is that? The answer is, it's kind of not. The police come down on you either way, right? It's the only practice different, like the rhetoric is different. You could say the fascist rhetoric is more extreme and enables worse behavior, but in terms of the actual like outcome, when you rated him the other day, he went, who rated? I didn't expect him to acknowledge my rate. That's fine. It's fundamentally, it's the same like line. I don't understand when law and order becomes fascism. Law and order is one of the loudest and most consistent mantras of fascism. It is almost like, find me a fascist government that doesn't screech that, honestly. That's one of the most aggressive things they push for. Vosh, try not to call liberals fascist, challenge impossible. Are you engaging with anything that I'm saying? This is like pretty straightforward. I feel like I'm levying some pretty straightforward analysis here. I don't feel like I'm asking you guys to catch up with me very much. I'm not like, this isn't a far reach, okay?
In China or whatever, when people are like getting arrested for protesting, the state of course makes up like another reason for it there as well. They'll be like, oh, trespassing, you know what I mean? Obstructing.
What do you think that's unreasonable?
Do I think that arresting someone for protesting?
Yes, a bunch of tents in the middle of a little lawn where they're not blocking or hurting anyone. Yes, calling down 50 trillion LAPD officers to crack down on that and arrest everyone and dox them and work openly with far-right agitators seems a bit unnecessary.
Peacefully is unreasonable, yes.
Well, do I think that, I think a better question is that if you own a property, like, should you have the autonomy to decide who's on that property?
And here we go with the like libertarian property rights framework for fascism. Also a very common line of argument. Yeah. First of all, that's public property. That's UCLA. So, okay. And second of all, I don't think you should get to engage in, like, this is literally like, oh man, there are people on my lawn, like deploy the nukes,
Well, in this circumstance, it's literally public property because it's UCLA. UCLA is a public school too. So that ultimately changes the dynamic a lot. It depends on what the property is, though. There's like private property, like someone's house, right? I don't think that people should come to your house and protest it at your house. Like it's very different, like disrupting your life.
Well, people do protests outside the houses of people, and I think that's okay, I think that's fine, as long as they stay on the street outside. There's a difference between your personal property and like a university campus. Aren't university campuses literally meant to be public forums? Is that not one of the things that people, like, this is like Enlightenment era founding fathers ideals of university campuses, that they're not just like a big private house. They're not meant to be like a manor or an estate of a wealthy genteel owner. They're meant to be the public forum. That's kind of what they were built to be. That's why they have those big open spaces. You know that, right? A lot of these universities were built with big open squares because people would literally constantly hold events there.
And violating your privacy and safety versus protesting in the middle of a public space at the school that you pay tuition to is perfectly valid in my opinion.
Well, everybody else pays tuition too. I think it's kind of unfair. For example, some people that pay tuition are locking other people out that are also paying tuition from the same services
not being locked
that they're
out.
both paying for.
So you bring up a good point, right? Like you're saying this person also pays tuition. He should be able to go to any space he wants to, any place he wants to on campus, which is
Yeah,
correct.
I mean, like, I'm
Except
sure there's a few exceptions, but yeah, generally.
Yeah, so obviously there are many exceptions, not just a few. Like, you know, UCLA campus is very famous. They shut off certain parts of the campus for filming and stuff like that all the time. The difference here is that this is a broad, open public space that these students were already occupying, and the reason why they're not letting, like, they weren't disrupting class, they weren't stopping people from going to class. The university, as a matter of fact, is the reason why the other buildings that were in the surrounding area were shut down.
Yeah, the university has been the only one preventing students from going to classes.
I talked to the students when I was there, and they stated they wanted to go to the library, for example. It's across the green area is across the way from the library. They shut down the library during midterms so that these guys' lives would be harder, so that they would have a harder time studying. They shut down the Wi-Fi so that students that are on the encampment would not be able to use it. Try to make this protest as hard for them as possible, which is normal. I don't think that that's a good thing to do, personally. I think it probably goes against the values that UCLA espouses, specifically. Ironic because, like, a lot of these...
The admins are ass. University administration is almost always evil. Universities make their money through investment and through real estate for the most part, and through sports. The education stuff is just tacked on. You know, it's what is it? A trust fund or a hedge fund with a library attached. You know, so no matter how good university professors might be, the administration are almost like the phrenology of university administration. You know, we're talking like Murdoch shit. Okay, for the most part, we're talking like evil fucking wealthy, like suburban, you know, like wasp white, like, you know, we're talking about some bad people. Okay, some bad people, and the deans they appoint. You know, the university professors tend to be pretty good, but they're not the ones who make the big decisions.
Campuses literally have like super woke terminology in their studies. Like USC literally doesn't have genocide studies. They call it resistance to genocide studies. So
oh boy.
For me, it's like, if you're taking that extra initiative to be extra woke on the aesthetic front, you should probably not be surprised when your students learn the actual lessons that you're teaching in these classes, which is that you should resist the genocide, right? So the fact that the university turns around after teaching them about many different genocides that have happened all around the world, and then tries to do everything in their power to make it as like annoying for these students as possible, is a little hypocritical in my opinion.
Yeah, not to mention, like, if you took the lessons of the UCLA administration and of the Biden administration to heart and then went throughout history, you would be opposed to the civil rights protests. Like, almost all of them. The idea that dissent must never turn to disorder? What the disorder? How do you think most of those marches went? Do you think the cops let them happen? How many photos have you seen of cops turning fire hoses on protesters, or breaking them down, or doing mass arrests, or people being arrested for doing sit-ins? Like, you would unironically be against MLK in that time. So if you ever wonder, how could people have been against MLK in his time? I know that there were like the super racists, but how could you even have white moderates back then? They're still around today. And Biden, because he's old, was around back then too.
It is hypocritical, but it's also something that's driven by the protesters' actions. And the protesters are doing that, and the result of them doing that is the university shutting down those places. And also the university, and you can correct me if I'm wrong about this, because I'm not really sure exactly. This is just what I've heard. I thought that about 2 days ago.
And then you get shit like this too, where leaders who are today against the tactics the civil rights protesters used will lie and take clout from the idea that they would have been on the right side of history back then. You know who actually was on the right side of history back then? There's one. There's exactly one, and you've all seen the photo of it. Bernie Sanders getting arrested. Arrested! In 1963. Meanwhile, Biden, who wants that clout, also said he got arrested while protesting in favor of desegregation. It was a lie. There's no evidence of it. And he would have been a proper adult by then, too. You know. He wouldn't have been like a 15-year-old scaping by the police. He just lies because they all want to seem like they would have been on the right side of history back then, but they wouldn't have. It's just a lie.
UCLA said that the protest was unlawful, but before then they were basically kind of like not addressing it or not calling in the police to do anything. Is that right?
No, they actually did call the police, but they called the campus police specifically to protect the encampment. I was actually kind of surprised at the university's actions at that time because they knew that there were a lot of counter protesters that, in comparison to Columbia, for example, which had literally called the police against the encampment in Columbia University.
Yeah, I saw that.
The UCLA campus actually had sent police.
57% of people polled back in 1961 thought sit-ins, freedom buses, and other demonstration by Negroes hurt their chance of being integrated in the South by a more than 2-to-1 margin right here. More than 2-to-1 margin. Guys, grow the fuck up. By a more than 2-to-1 margin. I think this was a poll just of whites at the time. I don't know if this was of all people. Fosh, that's a bit hypocritical of you. Were you at the civil rights marches? Yes, I were. Yes, I were. Yes, I were.
To line up.
And I was not only do you know that I was there, I still have adopted the Southern affect. Yes, I were. That's how there I was. Unknowingly, my persona back then still rises up and makes itself known. Okay.
Around with their backs to the encampment. And that's not just symbolism. That actually means something, right? When you send cops, like cops.
I mean, if the university is allowing it, then really that's the end result. I mean, they're the ones that make that decision. It seems confusing to me that.
I'm a dum-dum. Can you please explain how what Biden is doing is fascist, not simply authoritarian? Because fascism is a flavor of authoritarianism, and it's by far the most common one these days. Authoritarianism goes back to the pharaohs and beyond. But nowadays, pure authoritarianism, like authoritarianism without any inherent ideological traits, very rare, as it turns out. Almost always in the day, in an era of mass media, you want to frame your authoritarian logic in some kind of coherent internal ideology. And one of subjugation by the state, law and order. Like, these are very modernist fascist attitudes.
Based off of the logic that like they're trying to shut down the the library or the Wi-Fi, but they're also like having police come in and protect them. It seems very confusing. Like, what are their goals here? What are they trying to do?
Well, ultimately, their goal is to get the students to shut up and go away and stop bothering the administration to make these moves about divestment. I don't know if you're familiar with the goals of the student protests were, and every campus is different, but like specifically the UCLA one I can speak to.
Is to divest, yeah.
Yeah, it's to divest from UCLA. The UC system across the board is a massive endowment, and that endowment basically works like a mutual fund, and they're investing in a lot of corporations, and the students want to have financial transparency in what corporations the university endowments are going to, like what.
Oh, I didn't realize that he had repeated this so recently. Joe Biden went on the Howard Stern show just 5-6 days ago and repeated that he was arrested standing on the porch with a black family. I like how in his version of the story, he was arrested for standing for civil rights, but just by standing on the porch with a black family. So this way, he can get the clout of being in favor of the last major, student protest civil rights thing, but he wasn't doing anything disruptive. That's very convenient that he would say that, Very, very convenient. And he's saying this now because he knows there's political capital in lying about it.
What corporations they're investing in, which is perfectly valid, perfectly reasonable demands to make. As a matter of fact, a lot of companies have done this. A lot of people have done this successfully. Demanding that people divest from oil and gas companies for like environmental activism. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, it's been going on a lot. And just for the record, like I totally support them protesting against that. Even if I agree or disagree with it, it's their right to protest against that. The only concern that I have is whenever it shuts down other students' ability to learn or get an education, or for people to use the facilities in the way that they're intended to. Yeah. Whenever you talk about the actual like intent of the protesters, I totally support them. Absolutely. Or even the counter protesters.
But gleefully, like, talking about how the LAPD should have gone even harder and used tear gas. Again, like, he says anything. It doesn't mean anything, Completely empty, vacuous.
Because that's freedom of speech. I think that, if you don't have that, I mean, you don't have anything.
Yeah, as long as they're not trying to like directly agitate, disrupt, and like harm the students. Because there's also a completely separate dynamic here. You hate doxing, right? Like, I assume, of course.
We all do.
So would it shock you if I were to tell you that there are active organizations that collaborate sometimes with the Israeli government, sometimes independently, that are tasked with doxing students deliberately and even putting their faces on trucks around the campus and driving those trucks around the campus with their massive billboards basically saying like this student.
It goes beyond that. There are literally like IDF agents on US campuses. I think just earlier today there was one bragging about having been present at the UCLA crackdown, some Israeli special operations guy who was jerking himself off about how he had like infiltrated the enemy or something. And of course he's this like fat bloviating, with sunken eyes, like he would have fit in with any protesters. The big like chemical pepper spray thing, those were former IDF soldiers. Hasan outed one of them when he was at UCLA. Nice. Can somebody find me that link?
Their name and be like, this is an anti-Semite.
Oh yeah, I mean, I would instantly believe that. I mean, absolutely, and I'm sure that there are people on the other side to do the same thing. It's just simply
no. There are not Palestine-backed doxing trucks. There is not a Palestinian-backed university administration or a Palestinian LAPD or New York City Police Department. Okay.
There aren't any official organizations in the same way that Canary Mission, in the same way that like the organization I'm referencing is called Canary Mission. There's a couple other official organizations as well. Some of them are American organizations. They literally directly will be like, oh, are you at a pro-Palestinian protest? You're a anti-Semite. And then they plaster their faces. They literally try to stop.
Well, you got that like a week ago, right? Or 2 weeks ago?
StopAntisemitism.org called me an anti-Semite of the week. But I mean, what's up?
Well, it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And this is kind of the problem that I have, and I think that really, to me, it's pretty obvious that being against Israel doesn't mean that you hate Jews, right?
Of course, and there are plenty of Jews who are against Israel as well, especially at those protests.
Well, there's even some that are protesting in Israel, as far as I know.
Yeah.
So, yeah, no, I understand that, and I think that's problematic too. I don't agree with that either. It's, in my opinion, I think it's intimidation, but it's also like a misrepresentation. So yeah, I think that's bad in the same way that anybody else. I also don't think that people who are pushing back against these people, like the actual protesters that are making the encampments and everything like that.
I don't think anything. I don't think this. I don't think that. Yet, coincidentally, all the content that I produce, independent of me talking to Hasan, is like wildly right-wing on the issue. I just think everything's bad, actually. I have no beliefs. I have no principles. I have no arguments to make. It's just, oh, that happens and that's bad. Okay, well, this happens and this is bad. Whatever.
They're fascists. Like, I have people calling me a fascist, for example, which I think is
who
really
would do that?
And I think also,
I think some of those guys are fascists, for the record. I do.
And I bet some of the people that are against Israel are anti-Semites. Absolutely.
Yeah, but ultimately, no. I don't disagree with you. I think there's there's definitely anti.
See, notice how every point that gets made, he responds to with both sides. Like everyone, like he has no independent point. Nothing means anything. It doesn't matter. Everything's the same. Never mind the fact that when I'm not talking to you, I'm completely one-sided.
Antisemitism in the pro-Palestinian movement as well, but the broader, you have to look at the broadest defense of the movement. Right? Like, what does the movement signify? What their overarching goals are? The reason why I have an easier time calling those who defend Israel fascist is because Zionism is predicated on the idea that Israel has to be a Jewish supremacist ethno-state that literally has a certain percentage of Jews inside of Israel. This is a demographic concern unlike any other. Here in the United States of America, if we were to say America has to be a nation that is 75% Irish, English, and German, white, everyone would understandably go, that's insane. That's just white supremacy. But Zionism is that exact same principle, is that exact same concept, but for very valid historical reasons, it has been able to shelter itself as a defensive posture, as though it is a defensive ethno-state. The valid reasons, of course, being the Holocaust.
And in the context of like World War II and like everything that happened. I understand that, and I mean, I'm not really a pro-Israel guy at all, honestly. I don't really give a shit about them. It's not.
We're 20 minutes into 2.5 hours, guys. I can go for a bit longer, but should I skip? I feel like I should skip ahead. Do you think that as he gets more tired, he'll attempt making a point? If I move ahead by 2 literal hours, do you think he'll eventually arrive at like making a point? He will not. Okay, I kind of want to try anyway. Okay, I'm skipping way the ahead.
My dad about this, and like a lot of people that are like his age are like very pro-Israel, and a lot of people that are our age and younger especially are more pro-Palestine.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that the older you get, the more calcified your position on Israel is, because like it's easier to
They're close to
manipulate.
World War II, and yeah, and
Oh
also
no,
like
not
the
even
whole
that. It's more so.
Okay.
It depends on your media diet. If your media diet is less diverse, and the older you are, the more you like remember a time when there was like 8 newspapers and 3 TV channels.
I'm moving further ahead.
Right about that.
So that was
And like
that was the minority in that circumstance, and allies of the black community demonstrating unlawfully, like they were breaking the law. They were specifically going to segregated institutions, whether it be universities or whether it be restaurants, private establishments, and demonstrating in the show of force to say that these are unlawful, these are unjust laws that are in place, and these are unjust practices that are in place that are that the government turns a blind eye to, and that needs to change. And in that instance, just like these students, like there were plenty of different mechanisms of the state that, no, it wasn't just the government. I'm saying like private institutions were the ones who are enforcing segregation on their own volition. The reason why we have specific rights that actually interfere in the way that private businesses conduct their affairs on the boundaries of exclusion for certain races and even gender discrimination is specifically because, and this was the segregationist argument at the time, which was
the speaking ratio is like 90 to 10. Yeah, I kind of wish that Hasan would ask more questions about what he does believe, even though I know he wouldn't get very many good answers. But it seems like Hasan doesn't want to burn a bridge over this, which I can understand because he might be able to have more influence over Asmongold in the future if he doesn't. It's just like I don't think the Nick Fuentes video thing was out at this point either, so he couldn't have brought that up specifically. But like the divide between how confident Asmon is when he's not talking to Hasan and how confident he is when he is talking to Hasan is pretty significant.
Just let the businesses do whatever they want. I'm sure that people will take their dollars elsewhere, but it didn't work that way. Plenty of people actually genuinely loved the idea that there were white-only institutions. White people had more capital than black people, especially in the South, and therefore all of these businesses, if it wasn't for the federal government, inevitably due to a tremendous amount of protest and a tremendous amount of resistance and a lot of state violence that tried to squash this democratic resistance. If it wasn't for all of that, then we would still not have any laws that interfere in the affairs of private businesses and refuse them to allow them to discriminate.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. Definitely. I think if you're talking about the protests that are happening now, I do think that is different than the civil rights movement. It's certainly different. And whenever you're talking about the civil rights movement, also, like, I don't know if we can really apply something that happened 60 years ago to something that's happening right now or 50 years ago. It's very hard for me to say. I think in some cases you're probably right. In some cases, maybe not so much.
What do you mean by it's different?
It's different because the entire culture is different. The way that people are making decisions is different. The way that people can vote is different. There are all of these ways that are different.
The year is different. The calendars look different. We have computers now. So yeah, don't learn any lessons from previous civil rights movements. The fact that all of my logic would necessarily lead me to be against MLK Jr., none of that's relevant because it was a different time or something.
I mean, so yeah, black people were not, they couldn't really vote. I mean, I guess it's not that different now because there's many different ways of legally restricting black people from voting. But that's more complex. But ultimately, the methods were unlawful. The point I was trying to arrive at here is that the methods were unlawful. They were seen as unlawful. They were seen as they were met with a lot of police resistance, and ultimately that police resistance led to a shit ton of violence, and people were talking about the chaos in the exact same terms and in the exact same boundaries as they do right now with respect to the pro-Palestinian encampments. But ultimately, the students are following on the footsteps of those who fought bravely for civil rights and fought bravely against the Vietnam War. So,
okay. What are we going to get for this?
This is occupying the exact same spaces.
Oh, I mean, and I understand that. I have no problem with them doing that, but I do have a problem.
Look how Hasan sighs too, because it's going to be the same thing. Yeah, okay, so I agree with every valid point you made. However, and then but I believe in nothing, so
problem doing it whenever it's destroying property and taking away other people's education.
But they said that about the civil rights movement as well, is what I mean. Ultimately, I think I'm glad that they had the ends justify the means attitude during the civil rights movement. And I'm glad that they had an ends justify the means attitude during the Vietnam War protests or during the boycott, divestment, and sanctions
I think
protests
those
against.
conflicts are way more complex than that.
Man. You know, how can we even criticize Asmongold here when his position is just the same as the President of the United States of America's? Like, literally, like that, it's that, like, nothing that he's saying here isn't a logical extension of the mainstream position of the Democratic Party right now, you know? It's not even, like, especially bad. The, like, gleeful crackdown on the student protesters and the other, like, weirdo fascist shit is more bad, but this in particular, like, this is just, like, the modern line, you know?
Well, BDS is identical. It's the same exact. It's literally like almost definitionally identical. It's a boycott, divestment, and sanctions on apartheid South Africa in 1985. This was also another student-led movement as well, and the methods were identical too.
You know that there are some states that have passed anti-BDS laws that are almost certainly unconstitutional. Like the Zionist entrenchment in our government is so strong that there have been like outward, like, you can't do this anymore laws that are just flagrantly a violation of the First Amendment that they just do anyway. Many supporters of the State of Israel have often advocated or implemented anti-BDS laws, which effectively seek to retaliate against people and organizations engaged in boycotts of Israel-affiliated entities. Coordinated. Anti-BDS laws are designed to make it difficult for anti-Israel people and organizations to participate in boycotts. Anti-BDS legal resolutions are symbolic and non-binding parliamentary condemnations, either of boycotts of Israel or the BDS movements itself. There are some, like, really wild ones. 38 states have passed bills and executive orders designed to discourage boycotts of Israel. 38 states. 72% opposed laws penalizing people who boycott Israel. 22% supported such laws. What a great democracy we're in, you know? Like, 72 to 22 is an overwhelming support for there being no anti-BDS laws, but they get passed everywhere anyway. I wonder why. I wonder if the capital class has different sets of interests to the working class, and for that reason, the average American might not understand why this obvious violation of the First Amendment is necessary, and the capital class understands that uncompromising commitment to U.S. hegemony is it needs to be legally reinforced. You know, we did this during the colonial days as well. Like, Western European nations would have laws to protect economic transactions between them and their colony states, like India or France with half of Africa or whatever. Like, because they didn't want protesters to, like, cripple their colonies economically by organizing opposition to them. So they would do something similar, you know? So much for the free market.
The only difference is South Africa did not have the benefit.
For relief money after Hurricane Harvey, some cities needed to pledge you wouldn't ever boycott Israel. Jesus Christ. Texas City tells people no Hurricane Harvey aid unless they promise not to boycott Israel. Don't want to die in a pond? Want your roof to be fixed? Well. And all of this was before October 7th. This has been going on for a long time. If you ever wonder why the capital class has consolidated so effectively to oppose the growing U.S. opposition to Israel, this is why. Because they've been getting away with it for decades. Decades and decades of coordination, of infiltration, of normalization, all of that being uprooted over 6 months because Israel is so bad at managing its own affairs that it's making the American public turn against them despite the propaganda.
Of having another South Africa that they could learn the mistakes from and make sure that they don't repeat it. Israel had South Africa to look to, so they could, like, set up a lobbying effort and ensure that the state bends to their will as to the best of their ability.
My company has to submit this written form affirming we will not boycott Israel before we accept jobs over 100K. Jesus. Texas Government Code. Pursuant to Section 2270.001, Texas Government Code, boycott Israel means refusing to da-da-da, company means da-da-da. 1, do not boycott Israel. And 2, will not boycott Israel during the terms of the contract. Nice. A government entity may not enter into a contract with a company for goods or services unless the contract contains written verification from the company that it... Yep. Can you enforce this legally? I mean, all of this is almost certainly anti-constitutional, but none of that matters, you know? Unless people legally challenge it.
And the media apparatus as well.
Yeah, I mean, definitely Israel is much more influential than that. I mean, I can see where you're coming from. I think that that type of mindset is very scary to me, because while you're right that it does create a lot of positive outcomes, it also creates a lot of negative outcomes as well.
Do you have examples of the negative outcomes? Like as far as a democratically organized revolutionary movement?
What do you mean by that?
Like, is
Like
there
the negative like, well, I'm just saying
like
that
is there an example that you can give me throughout history where people organized on certain boundaries that were like democratically organized on certain boundaries, and they like enforced the tyranny of majority, and like something awful happened as a consequence of that?
I'm sure I could think of some. I mean, absolutely. And I think it happens all the time on a very basic level.
Could
like,
you?
For example, like during the BLM riots, people were obviously burning down buildings and doing things like that. That's something I don't really support. And I don't think that that's beneficial. And I'm never going to support that.
Mm-hmm.
It's not helping anybody. It's not doing anything for anyone. It's purely destructive. And I don't think that people have the right to do that. I think that, yeah, you should have the right to protest. But if you use the justification for the ends justify the means, then I think that anybody can use that justification, and that justification can be used for malicious reasons. And there's the only way to have a world that's fair is to have some sort of generally accepted rules. And that's what we have for laws. And I see where you're coming from with the civil rights movement, but you have to see the perspective that I have too, that if you allow people to just, justify themselves by thinking, well, our cause is righteous, so it's okay for us to do it, it would immediately cause huge amounts of chaos.
We're all understanding the liberalism-fascism link here, right? The obsession with and the institutional protection of law and order means you lose the right to protest unjust laws. Asmongold's logic is one of total subservience to the state, though he doesn't know that. Again, I'm not saying he understands any of the shit he's saying. Because the state is effortlessly capable of making illegal anything you do to oppose its interests. The real advocate for law and order from a liberal progressive perspective, not even a socialist one, just a liberal progressive perspective, is more in line with the beliefs of people like MLK Jr., who understood that you should do your best to operate in a framework that allows people to meet you where you're at. Don't engage in protests in a way that ostracizes and alienates people, even though he did anyway, just by virtue of being a civil rights protester. But if you genuinely make the call for law and order be like if you are subservient to that claim, then you are giving the state the ability to prioritize peace over justice. And that's why so many civil rights protests ended in arrests.
Yeah, because no, I understand. This is exactly the same arguments launched against the civil rights movement as well. MLK spoke on this with great frequency, where in the eyes of those who are being wronged, or in their experiences, not even in their own perspective, their regular existence is chaotic, right? And this is from letter,
like in case you want to understand how bad these arguments would be if applied historically and in a consistent framework. So far, about 2,200 arrests have been made of students all across the United States. 2,500 people were arrested and went to jail in Birmingham in 1963 alone. A single ongoing protest led to more arrests. And the cops always found a reason to arrest them, huh? Oh, you're loitering. Oh, you're trespassing. Oh, you're disrupting the public order. Oh, you're causing a nuisance. There's always some reason. Law and order. Now, a lot of these were kids. Like a lot of them. Hundreds of children had the clothes nearly ripped from them from fire hoses and were set upon by dogs and club-wielding cops. Hundreds were arrested, overflowing the jails. And Asmongold, had he been there, would have been cheering it on because they would have been, breaking the law. He would have said, oh, well, I don't necessarily oppose what they're saying, I just don't think they should have been trespassing the way they were, disrupting the public good. If the cops tell you you move, you have to move. They're upsetting the peace. He would have done exactly that, 46 years later, the mayor of Birmingham gave them a chance to have their records expunged with a blanket pardon. The mayor says he expects many people to refuse request certificates of pardon because they consider their arrest records to be a badge of courage. Can you imagine, as a black man, having a record of your arrest in May 1963 in Birmingham? Like, have an employer ask you how you got that one,
from Birmingham jail where he talks specifically about the white moderate.
Birmingham jail.
Where-
Birmingham jail. Where do you think those papers were written? That was the jail. That was the time. That was the protest. Some of the best civil rights writings we've ever gotten in that city from that protest. 2,500 people arrested.
He talks about the white moderate who places a timeline on another man's emancipation and another man's justice that says your methods and your means of protest are actually not right, or now is not the time. Where he very specifically talks about people who were naysayers to the civil rights movement who said like, oh no, now is not the time, or things are actually much better than they would be if black people were still enslaved, and there's too much property damage happening. The point is, from their perspective at that time, for black people, especially living in the segregated South or even redlined in the North, America was consistently chaotic, and it still is for many people of color, especially living in.
Mind, like you're talking about Martin Luther King. He also explicitly was against blocking transportation, and so there were lines even that he had.
Wait, Martin Luther King also participated in the Montgomery bus boycott.
Let me see if I can.
And the Birmingham protests, because it's a letter from a Birmingham jail.
I don't know if I can link this.
He led the Montgomery bus boycott for 382 days, which officially ended on December 20th, 1956. That's like.
This was MLK being anti-public transit. Actually, this is not based. Thank you.
In the chat.
In the Discord chat.
Wait, does he not know about the Montgomery bus boycotts?
What is this? Farmer King and Lewis, along with millions of Americans, struggle to figure out what would amount to legitimate, appropriate forms of nonviolent protest. Tactics dramatic enough to make their impact, but not so disruptive as to alienate supporters. Okay. Everyone could agree on the nobility, even the genius of the original sit-ins.
People didn't. No. The sit-ins were opposed by a 2-to-1 margin. People opposed the sit-ins.
With such dignity that their moral power was overwhelming. What is this? At an early press conference, an organizer with King's Southern Christian Leadership Conference declared, "We will tie up public transportation by laying our bodies prostrate on the runways of airports across railroad tracks." This degree of disorder was too much even for King, who walked back the staffer's comments. Over the summer, as the Kennedy administration reversed course to support the march, Rustin realized that attracting hundreds of thousands of marchers he desired meant abandoning the controversial tactics that would alienate the mainstream. In the end, as comedian and activist Dick Gregory said, the march went off like a Sunday church picnic.
But they would still get arrested. Yeah, they no longer decided to lay down in front of planes or whatever. But like they still did, their protests were still disruptive. That's why they got arrested. That's what happened.
Ultimately, these protests at the time were still declared disruptive, though. You understand that, right? Like every single instance, including the Montgomery bus boycott, was declared to be disruptive and at the time, and was violently suppressed by the state. Like none of these protests, not a single one of these protests actually was met with hugs and kisses, and the state being like, you know what, you guys are making a sound argument. And at the time, the coverage.
I think that whenever you justify, like you can't just do anything that you want whenever you've decided that you have the moral authority to do that. Like it's very easy to go and look at the civil rights movement and say, well, they did this to an extent, so it's okay for us to do it. But
actually, you can do that. I disagree. I actually think that you can point to the most successful civil rights movement in American history and go, they did it, therefore we can. I actually do think that. I do believe that. Yeah, I think that's actually a very good argument you can make. Just a bit of history. All right, let's not get too production value with it, please.
Also known as SCLC, brought national and black children who were trained in nonviolent tactics walked out of their classes and assembled at the 16th Street Baptist Church to march to downtown Birmingham. More than 700 children protesting racial segregation were arrested, blasted with fire hoses, clubbed by police, and attacked by police dogs. On May 3rd, 1963, hundreds more children began to march. Commissioner of Public Safety Eugene Bull Connor ordered police and firemen to attack the children with high-pressure hoses, batons, and police dogs.
And keep in mind, these cops weren't just saying, yeah, do it for fun. Yeah, do it for fun. You know, they were saying like, no, this is a disruption to public order. No, you're trespassing. No, you can't do that. Like, cops never say, haha, we're evil. That's not, when police crackdowns on civil rights protests happen, they don't say, haha, we're doing this for fun because we're white and racist, you know? They say, we're trying to restore order, you're doing this, you're doing that. Like, that's always how it works, every single time, you know? You can make arguments about the extent to which protests can engage in, like, legitimate tactics, or, like, which is better than this, or which is better than that, or whatever. I'm not saying that you can equivocate everything. I'm just saying that if your line of logic is, if the police have declared this unorderly, you're trespassing, therefore you deserve to have tear gas fired into your crowd, you would have been anti-civil rights protests. Like, that's just a fact. Just a fact.
If you apply this to real life, I don't think that it really works.
The civil rights protests were real life.
Just because you're morally aggrieved about something, it doesn't give you the right to destroy other people's property, to stay on their property, or to do things that hurt other people.
Well, the property is not their property. We established that. Like, this is, you know, they participated in sit-ins in colleges in the civil rights movement as well. They were doing exactly the same stuff that these students are doing, if not much more militant. There's also another side of the civil rights movement that often doesn't get discussed in mainstream media or in our schools in general, that also played a significant role, according to MLK as well, which was the more militant action where Black people would demonstrate with weapons or directly get into active confrontation with the police and, like, shootouts and whatnot. Now, that did play a role in increasing pressure points for the state to look at the more reasonable parties, the peaceful demonstrations, and concede to the demands being made by all of the parties. So all of this played an active role. You can't have one without the other, is what I mean. But even in this circumstance, we're looking at only one aspect: the civil disobedience.
I would genuinely encourage you guys, if you could, because I don't know all of it myself. I don't have the best memory, you know. But look at some of the major moments of arrest back during the civil rights movements, and just have like contemporary discourse leap out of the page at you, you know. On March 15th, 1960, students from South Carolina State and Claflin College organized to desegregate the lunch counter at Crescott 5 and 10 in Orangeburg, South Carolina. Though their efforts were disciplined and peaceful, 400 were attacked by police with fire hoses and herded into a stockade in one of the largest mass arrests in the civil rights movement. So what did they do exactly? The Civil Rights Movement Archive website provides a detailed description. Here's an excerpt. Students are welcome to spend their money at the Crest store in downtown Orangeburg, but they can't eat at the white-only lunch counter. On February 25th and 26th, some 40 students from the two schools tried to sit in at the Crest lunch counter, but the counter was closed and the stools removed. The white power structure declares that the demonstrators are the work of outside agitators, possibly communist-inspired. The city passes an ordinance to prohibit picketing. In mid-March, Crest and other stores reopened their lunch counters. On March 15th, a cold, wet winter day, Claflin Student Council President Tom Gaither and SCSC freshman Charles Chuck McDew lead almost 1,000 students on a peaceful march downtown to protest segregation and support the wave of sit-ins occurring in Rock Hill, Columbia, Sumter, Spartanburg, and across the South as a whole. Walking 2 by 2 on the sidewalk from their rally point on the Claflin campus, they march in groups of 50 to 75 so they can't be accused of disrupting traffic. The cops order them to halt and return to campus. They refuse. The cops attack them with clubs and tear gas. The fire department knocks them off their feet with freezing water from high-pressure hoses. Holding to the self-discipline of nonviolence, a hardcore of protesters stood their ground. Almost 400 are arrested in the largest freedom movement mass arrest up till that time. Soaking wet from the hoses and rain, shivering from the 40-degree weather, they are forced into an outdoor stockade that, according to local lore, had at one time been the site of slave auctions. They cling together for warmth and sing God Bless America, the Star-Spangled Banner, and newly learned freedom songs like We Shall Overcome. Supporters who try to pass them food and blankets are also arrested. Swift railroad-style trials for the arrested protesters begin 3 days later on March 18th. What does that even mean? My understanding is that refers to the way the railroad companies had jurisdiction over the areas around the tracks they laid, so they were effectively like company towns they could control. That's my understanding. I could be wrong. Like a kangaroo court is my understanding. They are defended by attorney Matthew Perry of the NAACP. The judge throws him in jail for pursuing his case vigorously. Convicted of breach of the peace, the protesters appeal the verdicts and refuse to pay their $50 fines, equal to about $444 in 2021. Eventually, the U.S. Supreme Court overturns the convictions because the sidewalk march was a peaceful, orderly petition for redress of grievances within the protection of the First Amendment. Wouldn't bet on this happening today, by the way. Just saying. It means they were lined up and run through the court one after the other. Okay, just like literally, just like pinballing them. Okay, gotcha. Do you feel contemporary politics leaping out the page at you?
You're right. You're right whenever you say you can't have one without the other, but I don't think that being an inevitability justifies the other. So
but they haven't even reached that point, is what I'm saying. We're currently in the beginning stages. We're currently in the stage where we're getting upset and using ruthless police tactics to stop peaceful demonstrations from occurring. Like these demonstrations have not even met like the civil disobedience metrics of the civil rights movement even.
Yeah, I think that really, I mean, I'll go back to what I said initially. I don't think that a group of students should be able to go into the university and just start camping out there.
Well, ultimately, the point is like there's nothing that they can do, right? Like, because I asked like, what can they do then? And you said that they should just go to a different university. Well, what happens when that university also has endowments?
So I was looking for some stuff online to continue making this point, and I saw this wonderful New York Times article that released 1 hour ago. The Columbia protests made the same mistake the civil rights movement did. You know, I think the participants at the Columbia protests would be honored to make the same mistakes the civil rights movement leaders did. You know, I don't know. Oh, wow, it's Asmongold. I share the campus protesters' opinion that the war in Gaza has become an atrocity. Israel has had every right to defend itself after Hamas's massacre, which was itself the atrocity. However, with the death of tens of thousands of innocent Palestinians, with uncountably more made homeless, beyond a certain point, however, we must ask whether the escalating protests are helping to change these circumstances. It's been like a week. Columbia's administration agreed to review proposals about divestment. Oh, okay, yeah. Man, these bootlickers.
Well, I mean, to a certain extent, the world is not obligated to appeal to you. The world, like, if other people don't want to do what you want, then it's not like everybody has to find a way that it's okay for you to do that.
What are you talking about?
If other people don't want to agree with you,
what is he literally? What the f is he talking about right now? Yeah, I know you want to like protest a genocide, but like you can't make it so but like other people don't agree with you. What are you talking about?
Not your right to force them to agree with you. That's crazy.
Yeah, this isn't about other people forcing other people to agree with you. It's more so about getting the state to follow through on what the majority opinion is in many instances. Or in some instances, not the majority.
Yeah, this is like white moderate rhetoric from somebody who doesn't even know how to make the white moderate talking points. It's crazy.
Majority opinion, but it's like the morally righteous thing to do. Like in the civil rights movement, I would say. Despite the fact that it was not the majority opinion, I think you and I both agree that the civil rights movement was objectively a good thing, and the methods were infinitely more disruptive at the time than what the pro-Palestinian side has done so far in terms of college campuses and everywhere around.
That is guaranteed. You're totally right about that. Obviously, it's not as bad as civil rights. It's not even remotely as close. I also don't think it's as extreme. Like obviously, you know, civil rights was something that was happening in America to Americans at that exact moment. What's happening over at Israel is much more disconnected from us. I don't really ever see that.
The disconnection.
I think it means as bad as in terms of like as violent or as extreme or whatever.
Disconnection does stem. You're right. One is a domestic issue. One is foreign policy. The disconnection stems from the fact that most people don't really truly understand that, like, as Eisenhower once famously said, every dollar Every
Yeah.
every dollar being spent on a rocket is a dollar that could be spent on building American roads, building American
Well,
bricks.
That's what I get
No,
for
and
looking
I
at
agree with you. Like, I
history.com
completely
for
agree
an
with you on that.
article.
But I think that
Not
the way that you
mute
stop
on
that is by
autoplay.
voting for people that also
Jesus.
agree with you and that are going to push those policies through. I don't think that it's reliable enough, and I don't think it's effective enough to try to do what they're doing and hope that, because like, and I can only speak for like myself and what I've seen. I feel like the way that a lot of those people, the protesters, have conducted themselves and what they're doing, I think a lot of people don't like it, and I feel like it's
That's great. Okay, I've had enough. It's yeah. It's the whole thing. I'm amazed that Hasan was able to tolerate this for a full, what was it, 150 minutes. Look, okay. At the end of the day, like the racists and fascists and white nationalists who oppose you because they scream and shout, I'm racist, they're a gift to you optically. The worst and most insidious people are the ones who are too dishonest or too stupid to understand they're employing the white moderate rhetoric. The people like Joe Biden, like our president, who you, statistically speaking, probably voted for. It's the most insidious behavior of all. And MLK agreed with that, which is why he said that specifically. I live in Canada. You mean you didn't come down over here and vote for him despite living in Canada?